the Uvalde shooting, the Uvalde shooting in January 6th hearings. Because Emma, you even brought this up with David Griscom, but I just kind of want to hammer on this point. There are still lefties who downplay the January 6th riots.
Yeah.
Whether it's school points, whether it seems like, oh, well, those are both the enemies and blah, blah, blah. And it's very disturbing to me because, especially when the January 6th committee released those videos, and you got like a big glimpse, you got like an inside glimpse. It was more terrifying than people thought it was. But also, like, there's like these types on the left who are like, oh, this has nothing to do with us, whatever. But these are the fascists and white supremacists and neoconservatives running around and the Christian nationalists running around, doing a coup attempt. Those are your direct political enemies. Those aren't like, some alt-right guy. No, those guys are going to action and trying, to implement what their vision of the United States is, which is basically, for example, the final solution to the negro question, to the woman question, to the Hispanic. It doesn't matter. That's a very serious thing. And that kind of annoyed me. That really annoyed me a little bit. But I also do think that the Democrats are also dropping the ball on this. At the end of the day, look, okay, I get it. Joe Biden and the Democrats, they're politically inept, great. But the one thing you should be able to do is to punish your political enemies and be messaging that political punishment. Because political punishment of your enemies does galvanize people to the polls. Of course, I want decommodified healthcare. I want all that.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen. He's weak. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Emma.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I said, yeah, go on.
Okay. So, I really do think, like, at the end of it, I'm not sure what's going. Well, I do know what's going on. There's still, like, this insane kind of, like, fossilized, there's good Republicans. No, they're not. And also another thing too, I think somebody else said that. I apologize, I can't reference it, but he said you have to tie the Republicans like it's one thing to punish like the ham and eggers and the white supremacists in the crowd. Okay, I get out that they need to be punished to the maximum. But the leaders, you know what I'm saying? You need to start pointing fingers like, oh no, this guy over here who's sitting next to me in Congress, help these guys.
I think that was Matt and my emphasis when we covered it last Friday when Sam was out. Because it's I go after the Proud Boys, go after all the people on the ground involved, but I am uncomfortable with the like breathless inclusion of and forefronting of Liz Cheney, because it undercuts the understanding that this is the Republican Party. This is the Republican Party.
No, absolutely. And the thing is, too, it's like and also, Emma, last thing and I'll jump. But the weird thing about Liz Cheney is that, like, she still has, like, that kind of brand recognition. And she's just like, how can I put this? She's almost just like the perfect kind of straw man for Republicans. Like, look at this good Republican over here. You know what I'm saying? She just perfectly positioned herself. But it's like, I'm old enough to remember, like, when, when the change are relevant. But they're not even really relevant anymore. There's no political juice there. You're just talking, like, to five Republicans in the Upper East Side somewhere or something. Who cares? Okay? But like, that's why I don't understand, like, why they forefront Liz Cheney or forefront any Republicans. All I want is tough talk and punishment for these people, honestly. Because at the end of the day, look, we're not going to get the health care. We're not get $10,000 in Sleepy Joe bucks for
student loans,
education relief. Yeah, but at the end of the day, at a minimum, I'm asking for competence. It's like, hey, punish these political enemies, because you will galvanize people. I mean, look, we all want other things, but at the end of the day, it's politics 101. Love you guys. Left is best. Take care.
Appreciate it, Bro Flamingo. Well said. Yeah, I mean, that is what I want to, and I think the January 6th committees are a good thing for the negative partisanship reasons. Do I think that they are capitalizing in the way to go after the Republican Party and behaving like an opposition party in the way that they should, as opposed to just making it about Trump? I do not think they're doing that effectively enough.
I agree. I think the fear has always been the same. And, it tracks back to the fear and the inability to prosecute Trump for any of his many crimes, during the presidency, before the presidency, after the presidency. And it's just
inability to prosecute Bush after what he did. It's the same thing.
There's just like a fear of, less of a slippery slope, but the idea of there is going to be accountability, that the wave of accountability is going to start. And, it might start with the far right, the individual soldiers who are marching on the Capitol. But that will eventually lead you to like the far right thought leaders, the people who like, not just the YouTubers who are getting their clicks and likes from like stoking up racial animosity and sort of anti-government rhetoric. Well, I guess anti-government rhetoric is fine, but far right demagoguery, but the Tucker Carlsons, and then it goes into the mainstream media and like the people who want to pretend or who view Tucker Carlson as reprehensible, but still their colleague and peer, are afraid that, well, yeah, if we start punishing people just for lying on the news in order to, build an audience, how will that affect my bottom line as a, liberal pundit at New York Times? Like there is just, we have, I'd rather hate to say it, like, Congress is a series of colleagues who work together, who view each other as professional peers who they owe more responsibility to than the public, as well as the obvious monetary incentives to behave that way. So, it becomes difficult to determine how much of it is like people ideologically thinking that bipartisanship is right versus people just like paid to pretend that. But the result is the same, which is that we have a Democratic Party, who proclaims that they are the best, last, only hope to stop fascism from finally taking over this country, as represented by the Republicans, who are also their best friends and dear colleagues who you should never do anything too, mean to, like yell at in public, because that might set a bad precedent for them. And that's just an unworkable situation. Some of the January 6th thing, the committee and even before the committee was like, yeah, but some of it is like you're just complaining about your friends, and we can't save Democratic lawmakers from their friends in this sense, especially when they're going to put their friends and their, the money that they can make with their friends over the public.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When I had a show the night of that first primetime January 6th committee hearing. And some people asked me, look, why weren't you covering it live? And one of the reasons why I decided not to was just, I'll be honest, I was not expecting for them to put out such a at least the video packages in terms of the timeline of things. I thought that was very well done. And I did watch that night live on the stream. But I also think like and I was, what I thought came to fruition just a couple of days later when they said they're not going to be recommending any sort of action on the DOJ. Like it's up to the DOJ to decide to do something. It's like, listen, no matter how well this is put together, if they're not seeking anything from it, then this whole thing is pointless. Like if they're not looking to actually make
I don't know if it's pointless, Binder. I do think it's good electorally. I think that they need this negative partisanship.
Oh, definitely. Sure. Okay. That's a good point.
And I think,
yes.
Just to your point, Matt, real quick, but I think that's the only action they're recommending, that like you go out there and vote to get these people out of office, which is not really an option for most people.
So that's my thing. Yeah, that's a great point, Emma and Brandon. Yeah. So it's not, it's not completely pointless in that sense, but in terms of like directly holding people to account for what happened, it's like, that's sort of what that's sort of what, gets me sort of bothered by this.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It's like, why are we just going after the guys who were duped to go down there and, they're already brainwashed by QAnon or whatever. And don't get me wrong, they should be held to account too. But if it's just them and not the guys who had the actual plots and plans, like sure, some Proud Boys and some Oath Keepers will probably get a slap on the wrist or whatever, or, actually maybe even spend some, time in jail or whatever. But they're still like, if that's the highest we go, then that's still not high enough. That's still not high enough.
Exactly. But that's by design, because they're the population of people who, benefited or who were present or who were complicit that can be most easily extricated from that larger block of people who have power. So like putting them in jail won't implicate, the people who told them to go down there. It won't implicate the people who told them to, go into the building, who prevented them from like, actually the lack of law enforcement to prevent them from getting that far. Those decisions are going to be like left sort of to the voters to decide whether anything should be done about that. The people who can just have been said to like maybe have been confused or just like, rank and file foot soldiers for Proud Boys, like there's, they're convinced that they're going to be protected as patriots, what we've seen in the aftermath of them like being surprised they were taken in. But, for the most part, they're just going to be disavowed by all the people who sent them down there. They're going to be told that like, oh, I never heard of a based shaman that's fake, that's fake news. And, Democratic Party is willing to let that go. And it just ruins this, ruins the lives of the people, the smallest ruins a lot of the people at the bottom. But at the same time, those people's presence there is often used as an excuse to justify why it wasn't like a fascist protest. It's like, the inclusion of people who may or may not be there for like a legitimate, quote unquote, free speech rally or a legitimate, whatever kind of like far right adjacent rally are used as a shield from not only just like actual fascists who are there to like spread fascism, but the people who make their money off of those fascists and those kinds of protests. And so like those are people we need to be going after, the core of fascists and the core of, people who make money off of fascism, and not like necessarily just the people who they basically insulate themselves with as like confused American citizens, like confused patriots, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this was the problem. Go ahead,
also on your both your points too, and I still agree with it in terms of like, it's good to get some people to see this, so like hopefully they actually, that's the hope that they go out and actually vote. But also that could backfire in the sense that like, if those people whose minds are being opened or they are seeing this stuff for the first time, obviously these aren't the most of political people if this is the first time they're seeing this. So in a sense, if at the end of the committee hearings and everything, nothing comes out of it, then those people could also just end up assuming, oh, I guess the case to make against them just wasn't there. Like, obviously, if there was, then these people would get in trouble. So why am I going to get riled up by this if there was nothing there to charge them with or anything?
Yeah.
No, it's a vicious cycle. And I think it's that point too. It also, even if you don't think of it as they did nothing wrong, you definitely get the opinion that Democrats are useless, which even if you do go out and vote for them and they end up with a majority in the House and the Senate and then the presidency, and they somehow manage to add people to the Supreme Court, they might still, and we've seen this in the past, under Obama in the first 2 years, they might still just refuse to bring charges against the Bush administration. They might still refuse to pass laws that improve the general state of welfare of most Americans, and all that's going to do is suppress vote in the next election, which, when we talk about the midterms coming up, the people are going to dismiss Biden and Democrats' inability to get things done through a series of excuses that just don't matter for most people who are actually trying to like get by paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And so like that sort of, apathy or being completely feckless about actually following through on their promises has meaning for people who actually rely on them to maybe make the world a better place.
It's all the Democrats have at this point is the negative partisanship. So, I mean, I'm fine with them taking what they have, but to your point, they the delivering for people front, they've really got nothing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a disconnect with the electoral thing. I mean, I think there's a use for like trying to get some semblance of the stuff on the public record, even outside the electoral stuff. But like the electoral stuff, there's a disconnect, because I remember the Trump impeachment stuff. And it's like, okay, we did all these hearings, and now we wait for public opinion to scare senators. I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
The Senate was specifically set up so that doesn't happen. That's why they wait 6 years. They don't give a fuck. And like, and there's never, and it was good for their campaigns though, right? Like it juiced anti-Trump sentiment was extremely useful. But like this idea where it's like, now we wait for you to do this thing, then make it accountable. Well, if you really believe that the way we have accountability in a system would be elections, I can be on board with that. One thing I would do would be to make it a fucking holiday. We've had Democrats with full control of the houses how many times since we've been alive?
Yeah.
And they've not done that.
Nope.
They don't expand the election.
They don't want that many working people voting.
Their plan is to out-organize voter suppression. And what that means is like we'll get our fucking suburbanites who we really want to show up for us.
And that's why they emphasize Liz Cheney.
And so that like it's all neutered. Like we want the electorate to come save us, but the electorate is like, I mean, maybe they can suburban it up to people give a shit enough about this sort of stuff. Like that'd be wonderful, but I don't think it's ever going to happen.
I will say also they support arming the police force to the degree that if you do show some kind of like anger in public about voter suppression, these right-wing states can just use all of the money coming from the federal government to like send a militarized police force after you. And so it just becomes one of those, like, again, a vicious cycle where they have to be allowed to appeal, or these Democrats have to be allowed to appeal to like this theoretical suburban mom voter who is open to voting Democrat every time, never quite does it, but is open to it very time, because sometimes she professes to not like, a la Joe Rogan's friend, not like how homophobic the Republican Party is. They never secure this vote, but they do manage in pursuit of this quote, either, as a lie to cover their own political and material interests, or like in just ideological obsession with them. They do manage to lose working voters. They do manage to lose people of color voters. They do manage to lose young voters, but it's just clear that they just overvalue this suburban mom archetype of voter well above all others. And it's just, it's just going to lead to a large portion of this country continuing to be run by far-right demagogues until like the Democratic Party either wakes up, or until some alternative political strategy to combat fascism at the highest scale arises.